Well, in a letter to students, the president of Emerson College in Boston called the death of George Floyd a, quote, legalized lynching, and recounted his own experiences throughout his life with racism. And he joins us now. Dr. Lee Pelton, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Why did you want to write this letter to the students of Emerson College?
Well, I wanted to do two things. One is to make the invisible visible, and that is to say to make Mr. Floyd and all of those who have died at the hands of police, want to make that visible. This is a man who died in a most dehumanizing way, as if he were not a real person and as if he did not have a history. And I wanted to reflect his history and the history of all people like him through my own.
You write, quote, the persistent structural racism that undergirds American society and permits the police and others to kill black people is pernicious and ubiquitous. I've unfortunately had conversations with people, and I'm sure you have too, who say, what structural racism? They don't think that's a thing. What's your response to those people?
Well, structural racism is not the same thing as bigotry. Bigotry are, single acts of hatred or ignorance about other people. But structural racism includes the following things. In this COVID pandemic, folks of color are perishing at a much larger rate than others. There is an enormous wealth gap between African Americans and the rest of America. There is an achievement gap in our high schools and K through 12 system. The opportunities available to African Americans for jobs also shows a gap when compared with white people. And I know that, a lot of what I talked about is not bound, strictly by race, because it also involves class and it involves gender. But this moment called out for me to say something about the history, the structural history, I want to put it that way, of a black man who was murdered brutally in public view.
And that includes your own history with racism. You write, black Americans are invisible to most of white America. We live in the shadows, even those of us who, like me, sit at the table of bounty. And you write in this letter very personally about the racism you've experienced in your life.
Some of the things that I mentioned in the letter is that I said I've been called the N-word in every state and every city that I've lived in. I've been pulled over while driving as black, as they say, countless times. When I was in college and on my way home, there were two police officers who approached me from behind. I remember even today the glaring heat of their spotlights on the back of my neck. Their guns drawn and walking up to either side of my car because I looked like some person, I guess, who had been suspected of some alleged robbery. So that's just, that's just a few of the catalog of instances that I recalled and recounted in my letter.
We have seen over the past week peaceful protests across the country. We have also seen looting and some violence, including here in Boston. How do you react to that part of these protests?
Well, that looting is unacceptable, clearly. It also does not mean that we should not seek to understand it. And to understand it would allow us to see that these acts of violence and looting were about people reclaiming power. An acceptable way to reclaim power, but we have to understand the source of their anger and their sense of disillusionment in this nation of ours.
Emerson College President Dr. Lee Pelton, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.